back to Around the SEC, the show where everything just means more. I'm Micah Farmer.
And I'm Jaden Echols.
And week one is finally over. It was a long off season, but we finally got to watch some football this past weekend. And there was a lot of good football in the SEC. Some surprises and a lot of blowouts as well to go along with those surprises. But most importantly, we're just happy we got to watch football again. How you doing, Jaden?
I'm doing fine. Coming off a good week at Auburn, got to see the win and everything, so I'm feeling pretty good.
All right, well, let's get right into it, and let's talk about the games that really were important in the SEC in Week 1, starting off with number 1 Georgia, who took on then 14th ranked Clemson, and Clemson didn't stay at that ranking for long, as Georgia had no problem with the Tigers in Atlanta.
Yeah, they didn't really look too hot. I get you were away and all, but still you got to at least show something as your first game or the first week. And Georgia, what more can we expect? It's Georgia, so they're pretty dominant.
Yeah, coming into the season, I expected maybe Georgia to take a step back. I thought maybe the off-the-field stuff would catch up with Georgia. That's not the case. This is the same old Georgia, it looks like, that we've seen for the last few years. We saw them do this to Oregon a couple years ago as well. I would say if you're watching this for some reason as a Clemson fan, sky's not falling for y'all. We saw Oregon almost make the playoffs after having this happen versus Georgia, but it doesn't look good off the start. Next up, Notre Dame traveled down to College Station to take on the Texas A&M Aggies in Mike Elko's first game as the head coach of Texas A&M, and Notre Dame actually came in and took that game, beating the Aggies when it was a very low-scoring affair, very competitive game, though. What did you see in that one?
It was, like you said, a low-scoring game. It was 6-6 at half, just only field goals. Notre Dame did lock in second half and all that, but just starting off, if you were there, I could understand, this isn't going anywhere, it's not very entertaining, but of course you have to lock in. Came in and secured the dub.
Yes, I will say I had one of my worst weeks of picks of all time this past weekend, but this was the one I got right. I don't trust Connor Weigman that much still. I'm a little bit worried about his decision-making, and I think if you're an A&M fan, you should be as well, because 2 picks in a week 1 at home. I know Notre Dame is probably the best secondary in the country right now, just based on the talent they have back there, but you still can't be throwing 2 picks at home in week 1 in a game that matters this much. But speaking of things you can't be doing at home, let's talk about the Florida Gators, who had an absolute disaster class, and let's just come right out and say it. Do you think Billy Napier's gone by the end of the year?
I think so, honestly. I think so.
Yeah, there's just not really much you're seeing from him as a Florida fan right now. I actually am a Florida fan. It was a rough time for me until I got to watch the Auburn game later, but 41-17, absolute beatdown. Cam Ward just basically playing backyard football out there. After week 1, would you say he's a Heisman contender in your mind?
He definitely had a very strong performance then, and it was very I was scrolling on Instagram the next day actually, and I saw a video of the Miami players talking to the Florida recruits. They're come to Miami and that. So he put on a pretty good show. I will say that. So it's definitely in the talks. He has time.
Yeah, I think he's right up there for me right now as far as week 1 standouts. I don't know that you can necessarily put a guy in the Heisman debate based off 1 week of football, so we'll see what Cam Ward can do as we go through the rest of the season and what looks to be a pretty terrible ACC, honestly, especially with what's happened to Florida State the first 2 weeks. But as for Florida, that started the year 0-1. You just can't afford that, especially with how difficult their schedule is. And Florida looks like a 3 or 4 win team to me right now with the way the rest of their schedule looks.
I can agree to that, yeah.
And next up, the next big win in the conference this week was by a team that not really anyone expected it from, and that is the Vanderbilt Commodores, who blew a 17-point lead and then got the win in overtime over Virginia Tech, 34-27. Is this a new Vanderbilt, or are they going to fall back down to earth, you think?
I think they're up pretty high right now. Coming off a win, overtime thriller at that. I think they're going to be all the fans and players are up pretty high, but as the season goes on, they're going to fall back down, and realize, hey, we're Vanderbilt. So it was a pretty good win. You stole the win. You kind of lost it at first, but you got it back. But I think they'll fall down to earth.
I think they'll fall back down as well. However, based on their schedule versus some other teams, I would still expect them to finish ahead of South Carolina, Florida, and Mississippi State in the conference this year, which is not something you can say a lot for Vandy, and a lot of that's going to be due to quarterback Diego Pavia, who us Auburn students are more than familiar with after he came in with New Mexico State last year and beat us in Jordan-Hare. We don't like to talk about that very much, but no. Pavia, very good quarterback, and now showing it at Vanderbilt. But finally, one big storyline as far as wins from the first week was the Auburn Tigers, who took down Cal's this week. They took down Alabama A&M 73-3 in an absolute massacre, and it got the Tigers their 800th win in program history. Only the 13th team to do so, but the 7th SEC team.
Yeah, I mean, getting 73 points is like an amazing way to get your 800th win. It's a very big accomplishment, and I was looking around, like researching about it and whatnot. That's actually the second most we've scored ever in football. We've only scored 3 more against Chattanooga. And I mean, hey, to start off week 1, that's pretty promising, especially after the offseason hype we got with the Freeze 4 and any other recruits we had coming in. It's looking pretty bright for Auburn so far.
I completely agree with that. The offense looked great. We'll see if Peyton Thorne can keep that up versus some better competition, but I don't think that competition starts necessarily this week, because the Cal secondary is also fairly weak. But you mentioned Chattanooga. Let's move on to the blowout side of this past week of football and start with the Chattanooga Mocs, who went down to Tennessee 69-3, and Nico Iamaleava looked great for the Vols.
I mean, yeah, like anything, honestly, I would say anything above 50 in college football, even the pros, is amazing. So, I mean, your offense was clicking, your defense was clicking, everything was working for y'all. You got the win. Now you just got to look on to week 2.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the pass game for the Vols. Dylan Sampson looked great on the ground as well, but obviously, grain of salt, Chattanooga, the SoCon, is not some mighty conference, but
yeah,
I think it's at least encouraging to see not necessarily the point total in the yards, because that's going to happen, but the decisiveness from Nico Iamaleava in the pocket and the spin he put on the ball. He looks to have the traits needed to be a quality quarterback. We'll see if he can continue that through the rest of the year. But the next blowout we're going to talk about is the Missouri Tigers, who took down Murray State 51-0. Great start for the year for the Tigers, and great start of the year for the duo of Brady Cook and Luther Burden, who connected once for a touchdown already. Is this the best quarterback-receiver duo in the SEC?
No. Simply no. I will say that because you have, I mean, Peyton Thorne and Cam Coleman. Honestly, any of them, like Cam Coleman, Malcolm Simmons, they all are great. And you have pretty much Auburn, and then you have Alabama as well. You have Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams. You know, I kind of hate to be that guy, but it's looking pretty more promising for them than for Missouri. So
I like you going with the freshman. I can respect that.
Yeah.
I think that this is the second best quarterback receiver duo in the SEC right now. In my mind, the best is actually Texas with Quinn Ewers and Isaiah Bond. We'll see what happens with them the rest of the year. But good start for Missouri. And one thing for them is you're worried about the run game with the loss of Cody Schrader, but Nate Noel looked very good, the App State transfer. So I think you have to be encouraged with that if you're a Missouri fan. But next up, the Texas Longhorns, who we just mentioned briefly. They took down Colorado State 52-0, and what more is there to say? You took down a team 52-0.
yeah, I mean, everything's bigger in Texas, including the score of the game. So you started off strong with week 1. You got to keep pushing and pushing, but it's looking pretty good for them too. I mean, Quinn Ewers, what more can you say? He's an amazing quarterback.
Quinn Ewers is very good for sure. Then the final SEC blowout we'll mention is Alabama, who took down Western Kentucky 63-0 in the first game of Kalen DeBoer's tenure as Alabama head coach. And Jalen Miller actually with the highest quarterback rating in the SEC this week in that game. So Alabama offense looks to be off to a good start. I know you mentioned Ryan Williams. What stood out to you about him?
2 touchdowns. I mean, as a freshman, you starting off, 2 touchdowns. I saw that one highlight where he made the 2 dudes run into each other or whatever.
Yeah, anytime you do that, that's special.
Yeah, you got to end up on some kind of top 10 show somewhere. So they started off pretty good too. I want to see how they progress as a duo.
It'll definitely be interesting. Ryan Williams, obviously, immense potential down there for Alabama. Now it's time to move on to our winner and loser of the week. Jaden, who is your winner in the SEC after week 1?
I understand it might be a little biased, but I will say Auburn because coming off of the off season that we had with all the recruitment and all the hype and all the, Auburn better be good this year, it kind of showed itself in the first game. Yeah, we played against Alabama A&M. I understand. It's only week 1, too. But it still showed that, the chemistry is there, the team is buying in, and it's looking pretty good so far.
It definitely did. I was especially encouraged by Malcolm Simmons. You talk about kind of the big 2 since the recruiting happened was Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson. But Malcolm Simmons through camp has really inserted himself into that starting lineup for the receiving core. I think he's receiver 4 right now, behind your top 3 of Cam Coleman, Keandre Lambert-Smith, and Robert Lewis. But I'm very encouraged by this Auburn receiver group for sure. We'll see if Peyton Thorne keep getting them the ball as they move further through the year. But my winner is the Vanderbilt Commodores for winning a game. They had not won a season opener versus a Power 5 opponent since 2006 before this year, which for an SEC team is way too long. So thank you, Vanderbilt, for getting it together. Impressive win for the Commodores. And I think pretty much everyone was happy to see that. I don't know that there are many diehard Vandy haters out there.
Basically, I was a few months old when that happened, so it's been a long time.
Yes, it's been almost Jaden's entire lifetime since the Commodores got that done, but they finally did it.
Yeah.
But moving on to our loser of the week, it's the same for both of us. It's the Florida Gators. You can't get blown out by a rival at home week 1.
I mean, scheduling Miami this early too, I don't know if that was like the smartest thing to do, but I mean, again, you lost at home, blowout against a rival in front of recruits too. Like, that's not the best look for your school at all.
Definitely not. And anytime you get the Miami players chirping the Florida recruits, like you mentioned, that's never a good sign.
No.
The team came out looking dead. Graham Mertz, even once he went out, DJ Lagway, frankly, looked better. So I don't know what Florida will do with the quarterback position the rest of the year. But kind of segueing into our week 1 overreactions. The first one we've talked about a little bit already, but the fact that Florida will win less than 5 games and Billy Napier will be fired. I'm on board with this. Are you on board?
I absolutely am on board. I mean, I look at their schedule. I don't really see them winning, but like maybe 2 or 3 more games. So he's probably going to lose his job.
Yeah, I would say the only winnable ones you look at now are Samford, Mississippi State, Kentucky, and UCF, and I'm not even sure they beat Kentucky at this point. And if UCF can run the ball effectively, you never know what's going to happen with that as well. But we'll see what happens with the Gators. Our next overreaction is Vanderbilt will finish above the bottom 4 in the SEC this year. And you know what? I think they do.
Yeah, I mean, they stole the win. You know, they're coming in pretty hot. You know, we did something finally. So, I mean, I think they'll do something this year. This could be their year for something.
I completely agree. I like the look of this Vanderbilt team. You have good talent on the outside as well, along with Diego Pavia, and the defense is at least solid by Vanderbilt standards. But let's now move into talking about week 2. We are almost there. The slate not quite as good as last weekend, but still some great games in the SEC. And the big one is Texas at Michigan. The Longhorns going up to take on the defending national champions. So, Jaden, who do you have in that one?
I personally will say Texas because, yes, it's in Michigan. Yes, they're the defending champions and all that. But Quinn Ewers, Quinn Ewers and Isaiah Bond, that kind of duo, like you mentioned earlier, they're gonna make something out of it. I mean, they're gonna have him and all the other receivers and pretty much every other way of scoring. They're gonna get through it. So I believe that Texas is gonna win that game.
I completely agree with you. I think that Texas wins. I think Texas actually wins by 20 or more in this game. I don't trust the Michigan offense at all. Their quarterback position did not look strong week 1 versus Fresno State. Will Johnson on defense is an elite corner, but he can't cover everybody. And the Texas receiver group is just too good for this Michigan defense. Sharon Moore is not the same level of coach that Jim Harbaugh is, so give me Texas pretty big.
Yeah.
Next up, we got Arkansas going to Oklahoma State to take on the Cowboys. So who do you have there?
I have Oklahoma State. I mean, yes, Arkansas won, and they're not really the best team, so I would say that Oklahoma State wins. In my opinion, they're more of a respectable football program, and I hate to say that because Arkansas is SEC, and I'm a diehard SEC fan, but it's the truth, so we have to live with that.
Yeah, same as you said. 70-point win over Arkansas Pine Bluff doesn't do much for me week 1 for the Razorbacks. Oklahoma State still has Ollie Gordon, and the Arkansas State run defense is still not great. You lost basically all your linebackers to the transfer portal, including Chris Paul Jr. to Ole Miss, which is the big one. Oklahoma State just too good on the ground. I think they win this one and defend home turf.
Yeah.
Next up, in the awful game of the week, it is South Carolina traveling up to Lexington to take on Kentucky. So, who do you have winning in this absolute disaster of a game?
I mean, not only because of home field advantage, but definitely Kentucky. I mean, it's South Carolina. I ain't really heard of too much of South Carolina doing anything in the past, really in my life. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Kentucky on this one.
Yeah, South Carolina struggled with Old Dominion week 1 at home. You're not winning at Kentucky. They don't have anyone on defense that can stick with Barron Brown on the outside for Kentucky, who might be the fastest player in college football, not named Nick Harbor, who does play for South Carolina, but he's also never on the field because he's not as good at football as he is at track. which is understandable. They're two totally different things, but track and football are two different disciplines, and Nick Harbor appears to be elite in one of those and still working on the other. So give me Kentucky as well. Then probably the second biggest game of the week in the country this week, actually, is Tennessee traveling to Raleigh to take on the NC State Wolfpack. So, Jaden, who do you think takes home the win?
I hate to admit this, I really do. Because as I said earlier, I am a diehard SEC fan in all sports, and I want to see Tennessee win, but you didn't ask me what I want, you asked what I thought. So I'm going to say NC State for that game because, yes, Tennessee and NC State are both respectable, but I think that Tennessee is going to look at NC State as we can just go in and do whatever and be done with it. But no, I don't think that's going to happen. I think NC State will show up, show out. They're at home, so they got a good crowd on their side and everything, so I think they'll pull this one out.
I don't hate that pick at all, but I do disagree. I'm going to go with Tennessee in this one. NC State struggled to defend home turf week 1 versus Western Carolina, and the transfers just don't look to be gelling. Grayson McCall didn't look settled in at all at quarterback. And this is kind of the Michigan effect on defense as far as the secondary, where all you have is Aiden White. Aiden White can't cover everyone. But then also you lost basically all your speed at linebacker with Peyton Wilson going to the NFL. The athleticism just isn't there on this NC State defense, I don't think. So I think Nico Iamaleava dices them up pretty much. I think Tennessee wins this one. Then our final game of the week is Cal coming into Jordan-Hare Stadium to take on the Auburn Tigers. So, Jaden, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you might be going with Auburn in this one.
Yeah, I am going with Auburn on this one. You came off the second most points in school history. I mean, in front of your home crowd, and you're going to be there again. Cal is a respectable team. They gave us our work last year, I'll admit, but I feel like Auburn's going to win also because you're playing in front of like one of the most intimidating crowds in the country. It's so loud in there, just like I couldn't imagine being with all the helmet and pads and actually trying to play. I'm a fan. I'm just there adding to it, you know. So I mean, it's going to be so tough for Cal, but I think Auburn's going to win this one.
I completely agree with you. I think Auburn takes home the win here as well. It is a whiteout in Jordan-Hare this weekend. The freeze warning is coming back on the plains, and Cal does have an elite player in Jaden Ott, a running back, probably one of the top 5 running backs in the country, in my opinion. I just think the Auburn defense is more than good enough to slow him down, led by Eugene Asante, Jaden McLeod, Dorian Mayusi Jr. Those guys are all going to be key to slowing down Jaden Ott. And if you can keep him contained, Cal can't move the football. It's that simple. And the Cal defense is not special whatsoever. I think Auburn gets this one done pretty easily to give the SEC a win over the, let me check the notes here, the ACC. Cal's in the ACC now. This is still so weird to get used to in college football realignment. But I'm going with Auburn. And that is actually it we have for y'all this week. So thank you guys for tuning in. Enjoy week 2 of college football, and we will see you again next week on Around the SEC.